Hello, guys. How are we doing today? Some just
Hello.
woke up. Others, like us, already have more than a half day done. But great to see you all here. Antonio, I'm missing you, well, at least your face. So maybe you can put your camera on. Yeah, so we have a full hour, and of course, I think some of you already listened to the workshop previously from Marcus, and actually he started to talk about the applications with regard to machine learning and deep learning, and how you could actually create a win-win situation if you want to partner up, for instance, with a financial institution or with another more traditional evolved company already. And, and to be fair, this is also something that I'm really interested in for myself, because we try to build this platform with trusted RegTech companies, where we say, okay, if you have a certain standard, an assessment has been done, and you have a certain standard in that you can deliver what you're actually saying or selling that you deliver, then that would be much easier, for instance, for financial institutions or for more traditional companies to trust you as a startup or an scale up, to actually buy your products or to partner up with you. And I think everybody has stories that once you want to go and have this partnership, then the questions will be asked. For instance, is there some support? Does the product really fit in our business? And that is normally later than the due diligence that you should have done upfront. Especially here in Singapore, we have also a couple of those cases, and I'm very glad that we actually have RegTech companies in this session, and representatives of big banks, and of course also a representative of ING Lab, which is of course also a huge bank. Because my idea is to really have a discussion about, first of all, what are the challenges at the moment? Are they different than 2 years ago? And then secondly, I would like to go more into the adoption phase, whether what is happening. Is there already wide adoption, or are we still a little bit behind? And maybe also from different perspectives from Europe, because we have Europe, we have the Middle East, and we have Singapore. So that would be also nice to lift out. And then of course, a little bit about what can we do to accelerate that process, that we can actually really, get those RegTech companies, those partnerships or those sales. So that's a little bit the structure. Before we, of course, dive in, I really would like you guys to present yourself for quickly, because like I said, we're all on the different sides of the world, and I'm very proud that you could make it with your busy lives. So Suleiman, I'll start with you. Can you please tell a little bit about yourself, about your passions, and what you think of this topic?
Well, thank you so much, Mona, indeed, for having me on the panel. It's really a pleasure to be with you and my fellow panelists. If I have to answer your question, it's going to take the whole hour, so I'm not going to answer that question to its fullest. I'm going to be quick and brief. My name is Suleiman Barada. I'm currently located in Beirut, so I'm speaking out of Lebanon. And I'm the head of UABdigital. UABdigital is the ecosystem digital transformation arm of the Union of Arab Banks. The Union of Arab Banks is the representative association, not-for-profit association of the Arab banking ecosystem, and it's been around for over 4 decades. Really, and my position. This whole UABdigital is new to the ecosystem anyway, because we realized that our member institutions, the 360 banks and financial institutions in the 20 Arab states, they require a lot of unbiased advisory and assistance and support and capacity building, so they can accelerate their digital transformation efforts, and also so they can make sense of their innovation investments. So we took the initiative at the union to establish this whole new unit, which I'm spearheading, and I feel like I'm very lucky, because before the union, I used to be a service provider for about 22 years, wearing the hat of a solution provider, more focusing on enterprise solutions. So, and I'm now more on the I'm not fully on the customer side, but I sit somewhere in the middle to orchestrate supply and demand. Very happy to be with you today, Mona, and very honored really for this intervention.
Great, thank you. Pelle?
Thank you.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I'm also very thankful to be on this panel today. I'm very excited by the subject as well, as it's something that I'm working with every day now. So I am I'm Danish but based in Switzerland. Our company Notabene is a fairly new company, and we're really working on building trust in crypto transactions and blockchain transactions for regulated entities. So we like to say that we're helping companies and people have the confidence enough to be able to perform transactions without regulatory risk, counterparty risk, fraud, all of these aspects of things. We are a very new startup. We started early this year, and which also means that we are, we're working with a lot of regulated companies, and it's definitely, it can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes, because we are so new that, we don't have a 5-year track record of customer references, those kinds of things. We're also, we just started working on getting the security audits, all of those kinds of things that are required to work with larger institutions. And we're going through all of that process, but it's definitely, when you're building your product, when you're going out there, figuring out how to solve issues, there's a lot to learn just from working with these institutions outside of just the product area as well.
Great. And we will discuss that, because that is something that I really would like to know more about, and about those challenges, because we hear it here all the time as well. But Koen.
Yeah, hello, thank you very much. I'm also very pleased to be here, and I've been there already since a very early morning for me. So Mona also asked me to help a little bit.
That is what it
yeah,
is, right?
yeah, but that's what it's all about, collaboration, right? So, yeah. Pelle, where you were saying you don't have the 5 years of track records, well, the company which I work for, Blanco, just in October, we reached our 5 years being in business. And we are a RegTech, fintech startup, pretty much in the investment space, which we try to basically provide something from A to Z for an investment manager, an IFA, a private bank. And so far in the journey, we managed to get 120 financial institutions on our platform, which has been quite of a journey. But talking about my passion, because Mona also asked me what is my passion. And I'm sorry if I'm going to be boring, but unfortunately, my passion is also banking. It's also about RegTech. So I'm actually very heavily involved in the RegTech industry. And I'm happy to share my views, my insights, and looking forward to this discussion. And thank you very much, Mona, for organizing this.
Sure. Now, and last but not least, of course, Antonio. And he had the good thing with his background is, of course, as well, that he has all the experiences that we are discussing, I guess, in this session. He has been an entrepreneur. He is now in a big bank. He has been in a big tech company. But okay, I stop here.
Thanks, Mona, for the introduction. Antonio DeLorenzo. I'm currently with ING Labs, and am kind of heading our initiative here to build ventures, right? So I'm thinking as an investor in the shoes that I have today, but as well very much in the mechanics of each one of the initiatives that we build, because we begin really with a blank canvas, looking at the problems and the challenges that the bank and our clients have. As well, I've been a buyer, so I'm looking from the lens of is a partnership possible? What are the mechanics of that deal? What can you do? What can you not do? And last but certainly not least, probably most prominently, I've sold into financial institutions as well, and that I think it gives you a really crystal clear perspective of just what an uphill climb it can be for people that are venturing out on their own and trying to build solutions. Last, I should add, though I was never in supervision or enforcement, I worked as a regulator on the securities market side in Malaysia for a couple of years. I was looking more at the funds policy there, but that also gave me a view into what kind of technology is the most useful, for instance, when you're piping in fund returns or AUM, so that you can uphold the tenets of regulation, right? Safe and efficient markets and investor protection and so on.
Cool. Okay, now thank you. So to set the scene a bit, what we hear the whole time, the past few years from a RegTech company perspective, is okay. It is super difficult to sell into, for instance, large incumbents because the sales cycles are super long, right? You don't know where to start. It is not like you have like you start with a compliance officer or a risk manager, and at the end you need to go to the other side of the world to get the approval. And before you know it, it's already a year later, and you had your third round of funding, but yeah, that is then also gone. And then all of a sudden, your company is dead now. And then you're 2 years in a row, and you were trying to get that partnership with the large incumbent, which didn't happen in the end. Okay, that sounds like a very depressing scenario, I must admit, but but I really would like to have just those two different opinions, because we have a little bit of a different group, right? I mean, Suleiman, from you, I really would like to hear from the banking perspective, because you have those 350 member banks under you. So yeah, what do you think of this scenario? And then, of course, from the RegTech companies, their point of view. And then Antonio can, governance it all around, I guess. So please.
Sure. If you allow me first, Mona, maybe we need to change a little bit the title of the panel from vendor management to vendor experience. Because, we're all into the experience economy, and management, the notion of management has become a little bit maybe misleading or irrelevant, especially to the era that we live in. So the challenges are really huge, humongous. But we don't want to be optimistic here. We're here to present the challenges and to try and think out of the box as to how we can overcome them. Some of those challenges between the startup scale-ups and the banking sector have actually sneaked from the previous era of enterprise solution deployments and so forth, and some of them are emerging challenges, and maybe the some of them have are those old challenges, same old challenges, but that have developed even further in the with the emerging technologies. So we've always had various challenges between technology deployments, technology investments, and generating business value. And I really would like to quote, it's very hard to speak after Marcus, by the way, but I really would like to quote Marcus' statement, in that collaboration is key. You cannot imagine how relevant this small statement is. And also another thing that he mentioned, I would like to reiterate, is by what technologies, what investments do we pursue from all the various choices that we're being flooded with, okay? And he particularly focused on medium complexity, medium business value. right? As a mean to increase adoption, to actually infuse adoption into organizations, and particularly the banking sector. Another thing that I would like to mention before I probably attempt at providing an opinion on how these challenges, emerging challenges, or the old challenges can be overcome, is that for an entity to be regulated, it's not their fault, right? They're actually regulated entities, so we've got the regulated entities, we've got the regulators, and we've got the tech, companies that are trying to break all the rules and innovate all out of the box, really, and which is something that's definitely needed. We've been living in the same in the same space forever, so it is time to change. It is time for change. Now, what is driving change within the context of fintech, RegTech, and the financial industry? This is happening across all the industry, right? Mm. So there is no industry that is that's excluded from this dynamics, the dynamics of emerging technologies and the disruption that it is causing. But within the context of financial institutions and innovators within the space, really the challenge then becomes even higher, and the topic becomes even hotter, because it is affecting the savings, the pockets, the cash of the individuals, of the constituents of this earth. So that's why we feel that the disruption within the financial industry is a little bit harder and maybe louder, right? My 2 cents of the day, maybe to try and invite my fellow panelists, to comment with their views as well. It really takes two to tango. So it takes the innovators and the incumbents to generate optimal economic and socioeconomic outcomes, right? The innovators alone cannot thrive. They can actually start their journeys and they can grow, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to get to fulfill their utmost or optimal aspirations without tangoing with the incumbents. Equally, the incumbents cannot really get stuck in their legacies forever, because even that's not a possibility. That's no longer an option. I think it's already past that. This new reality is here to stay, and they need to move out of their comfort zones, right? And that's one role that UABdigital is actually, that's one of my mandates within my ecosystem. That's why I exist today within UAB, is to actually try and advocate change and courage, right? And to try and build those bridges between innovators and the incumbents. We're actually starting, just quoting that as an example, we're actually starting a whole fintech hub from within the banking sector, the first ever in the Arab countries, right? So the first ever fintech hub that's going to be grown and nurtured by member banks. So this is one bridge that I think and I hope will actually bring things to a better ground. Quickly, I would like to go through some quick values that I invite everyone on the panel to probably reflect on and comment on, and even the audience through their Q&A. What both parties have to exercise so they can get to better deals is, first and foremost, listening. That's a basic skill that both parties will have to really exercise and practice. Finding the common purpose. Sorry, I've written those because I really wanted not to miss any of those points that I had in mind. Partnership, a full partnership spirit between the two worlds, because they can deliver a multiplier of value if they come together for value co-creation, right? So value co-creation between incumbents and challengers and innovators can deliver multipliers of the value that they can deliver on their own individually. And moving a little bit from product centricity to customer centricity, coming together as innovators and incumbents who understand maybe the mindsets of the customers even better, and the regulatory frameworks better, so they can deliver something that's both regulatory viable and customer centric as well. Relevance, empathy, and synergy are key values that can only make this relationship work for the best interest of both parties.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you, and that is of course the utopia, and all those points are super valid. But my question would be, are we there? Because you mentioned quite a few things that are important, right? Collaboration, working together, innovate, but then within the regulatory environment. But yeah, if we look at it from the other side, from a tech company, and I think that definitely, and Pelle, please chip in here. I mean, are we listening to each other in the right way, that we can actually really have that collaboration at such an early stage when you are a startup?
Yeah, in at least in the area that we're working with, I feel it's a very collaborative environment. So very quick background, we're very specifically helping companies implement what's known as the travel rule, which is it's been a FATF recommendation for a long time, but it's only just since last year started to be applied to crypto transactions. And we're quite excited by this rule, because this is like one of these missing pieces, allowing incumbents, for example, to be able to even touch crypto, without having an idea about source of funds. It's very difficult for incumbents to even touch and deal and even think about risk or anything about where do we even start, right? So it's not the only part of it. There's also the custodial services, etc., who also perform a very important aspect in getting the collaboration between the existing crypto industry and traditional banking industry. But there is a lot of collaboration here. So we're working with custodial services, for example, which is key. We have the same customers, we have the same goal of really, making this technology available, not just to early industry members, but actually to help get incumbents, new fintechs outside of the blockchain space to use this technology safely. And I think there's been a lot of collaboration also with the regulators. I mean, the regulators have been very, very good at reaching out. They've actually, as a very early person in the crypto industry, everyone had fear of the regulators, but they've been really, really good at actually understanding the technology. At least FATF has, FinCEN has, MAS has, and really, they've been really been collaborative with the industry to figure out how to solve this. And I think them taking this active role is actually helping now make it a lot easier for incumbents to start work with this technology as well. So even though we're a startup, we've been invited to speak with FATF, we've been invited to speak with FinCEN, a lot of these kinds of things, and we've been talking with people all over the industry. So our experience is that it's been a very collaborative process, because everyone sees this as such an important aspect of really bringing this technology to wider adoption. So I've been very happy on that particular aspect.
Oh, that's really positive. Yeah.
We're happy for you.
That's a very good story, yeah. Maybe I can chip in as well. Yeah, maybe I can chip in also as representing also a RegTech startup, scale up, whatever it's in the name, right? I'm actually been hearing a lot of theoretical talk today, and that is good, because it's good to have a philosophy about something, to have an idea about something, and well, in the sake of the discussion, I might just take a couple of black and white statements just to fluff up a little bit our discussions, because I do hear about collaboration, I do hear about partnership and all that, but I think there's also a responsibility for the startups, because I've met so many startups that if you ask what is the 3 lines of defense, that they have no clue and they don't know what they're talking about. So my point is also, it is good that you come into a market, but know that there is a certain language that is spoken. And that is something, because Mona was talking about changes or asking us if there are any changes. I do think there are changes, because if you go 5 years back, it was more easy to get in contact with the big bank, because there were innovation centers, there were those that were not sleeping very well because they were afraid to be disrupted the day after. So the innovation guys and girls, they were very open to bring in the new ideas in the bank, because then they could say to the C-levels, look, this and this is happening on the outside. But what I see now is that this is drastically changed. It's no more a dress up within the banking industry, but it's pretty much a solving problem statement. It is looking at what is currently happening, what do we need to solve? And happy to hear from Antonio, because the feeling that I get, for example, from ING is very strong on this. They have strong programs in Europe, but it's very much focused on the fact we have a problem, we want to solve it, how can you help? And that by its own is something completely different. Also, the fact that we're talking RegTech, so we talk a lot about compliance issues, the regulations. Happy to hear FATF as a law coming in, anti-money laundering, very large, also a big driver for us in our business. But what you see is that those compliance officers, they have been overwhelmed with working their beep off for the last so many years, because they got all the backlog from the crisis in 2008. And in the meantime, you had the innovation centers popping up, but the compliance people, they were still in the basement and still trying to solve the problem. And what I see now is that they now come up because they're now in control or in a better state of mind, and suddenly they come to the market. And when they come to the market, they look at us as startups with bright ideas and new technologies, and suddenly they are like, whoa, what the hell are they bringing? They're not at par sometimes with what is happening in the market, and you cannot blame them because they were actually saving the bank. So what I see now is that the way we actually selling to banks, it almost feels that we're back in a very traditional way of selling, because you come back with the line management, and the line management will go back to procurement. So you have a very traditional way of selling, whereas many of us as startups now still are in this, oh, we need to collaborate, we'll need to go into whatever type of programs. No, in my opinion, it's very simple. Back to the startup, it's you have a problem and there's somebody that brings a solution, and there need to be a need for this solution. If this is the case, match in heaven and people will come together automatically.
Wow, yeah, that now I would say, Antonio, take the floor.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So I'm a big proponent of collaboration. I think it's absolutely necessary. At the same time, this notion of going to a traditional way of selling, that's the best damn thing that can happen. Why? Because it's tried, tested, and you kill one of those terrible phenomena that happen. And here it's the sales part, right? Collaboration should happen for defining problems, ideation, solutioning. That's great. But when it comes to sales, the closer we can get to traditional sales of the, hi, Mr. Jones, I've got a great proposition for you. That kind of tried and tested method eliminates what I call the killer coffees, right? So let me contextualize that. And then I'll also touch on the way ING is approaching this, right? So 2012, you started to see some of the global players opening up labs, accelerators, incubators, and they were open. They were looking for lots of use cases. And through the course of the year of 2012, they did. And somewhere in 2013, you would see an innovation lab at a bank where you've got, your token people. The caricatures are that they have ripped jeans and they're using cool language, and you come in as a vendor, you start selling a proposition to them and they go, oh, you're using blockchain and you can replace blockchain with AI or whatever. And then they say, you know what, I see what you're selling to me, but let me just take a look. And then they pull up the the problem statements that they have. And the use cases have come from 70 branches around the world, and there might be 30 problem statements coming from each division in those branches. So ultimately, you've got 1,000 use cases, and they type in a couple of tags, and they see that there are 17 or 50 use cases that apply to the technology that you're using, not the problem you're solving. So here they would say, let's have a cup of coffee after I've had a chance to talk to these people, and let's see how we can implement your solution in a really meaningful way. This begins the 100 killer coffees, right? As you're doing that, you're wasting time, money. So if it's collaborative, as in let's ideate, let's throw ideas together, let's diverge in terms of thought and then converge and find solutions or whatever it might be, that traditional means of selling then means a tried and tested approach. What that really means is stamina and action, right? And stamina and action really is build a pipe, right? You're going to make 100 calls, you're going to get 2 maybes. Maybe one of those maybes is a yes. So your chance of making a buck is 0.5%. That's reality in sales, right? Cold sales. The second part of that stamina and action is build a stakeholder map. Who are you talking to? As you start kind of getting in touch with more banks, you're going to realize that the key stakeholder, the key convincer is not going to be the person that signs the check, but that key stakeholder can make or break that deal. And getting to that key stakeholder, convincing them that from a risk perspective, from a non-financial risk perspective, and security perspective, data privacy perspective, and the list goes on and on and on, that it's actually okay to make this transition to using a new cool technology or solution that employs technology that is absolutely new. A good example of that is a conversation I remember having about including a service into a payment system. The question then came up from risk, not from IT risk, not from any other kind of risk, but just risk. And they asked, okay, so you want to implement our solution. We want to implement your solution globally because we see how fundamentally good it is. Can you tell us, would you do this as a parallel or as part of the or a serial process? Meaning that if it's a serial process, you have to wait until this operation is over till you move to the next one, and so on and so on. A parallel would literally mean that your service sits alongside that critical operation that is serial in nature. And my answer was, well, we can configure it whichever way you want. And he sat back and smiled and said, great. And I said, why? Just out of curiosity. He said, well, I'm just going to use a random number because I might give away the bank. But he said, we have 100 branches around the world. And our risk policy says we can only change 1 branch's serial process per year. Are you going to be around in 100 years? So that's the kind of thinking that you're up against. And it's not thinking, it's policy, right? And it's there for a reason. It's there to manage the risk that is inherent. So 2013, you had all these startups getting up and saying, banks are going to die. Some even went as far as saying banks are evil. Ultimately, that then infuses fear into the equation. And then what are you left with? People are scurrying to create solutions, partner with fintechs. More fintechs get created, more fintechs die. And that became this cycle that we went into. Now it's 2020. Now the fear is not coming from fintechs and wallet solutions because banks have realized, well, I can just put a wallet solution together, no problem. And in fact, I can even compete on global transfers. Oh, remittances, no problem. RegTech, well, I have a big, broad menu of solutions I can choose from. And actually integrating that because my tech stacks are aligned, it's become a lot easier. But what's the real fear now? The real fear is now coming from things like central bank digital currency. If you're going to start issuing, M0, the cash and cash equivalents, if that liquid form of money is issued straight to consumers, straight to businesses, where does monetary policy go? Where does your net interest margin income come from? That's the kind of disruption that's really, kind of, I guess, keeping people up at night. And we're starting to see this kind of thing happening with the People's Bank of China now doing the first pilot. And now they're even looking at how we can use these beautiful gizmos to do double offline transactions, meaning we don't need to be connected to a network. So now I'll come back and wrap up with ING and how we're looking at this thing, right? So indeed, Koen, you're right. We started identifying, our innovation effort started in 2016, which was late in the continuum. If we look at the last 10 years or so that innovation's been happening. Our programs were set up to take advantage of partnerships, to take advantage of new builds. In the last few years, like any other company, we've learned from our steps. And what we've now done, some of you may have seen in the news in September, announced that ING is kind of bringing together all of its innovation assets into what we're going to call ING Neo. So ING Neo basically says that, there is a digital transformation component that's to do with efficiency and all of that. There's certainly something to be said for transformation, right? Because digitization doesn't necessarily mean transformation. Transformation is more, how can you digitize and create workflows that increase your efficiency tremendously? And then ultimately there's partnerships where you've got existing companies that are out there, whatever stage they may be in, and bringing them in, giving them the footing to be able to interface with us to be able to create real progress. And last but not least, what I'm doing, which is really taking the problems, the challenges of the institution itself and of the clients that the institution has, and trying to solve for those challenges in a way that we're building businesses around it. And I don't say building ventures, I say building businesses, because those businesses may manifest as ventures out there in the world, or they may manifest as business lines or business units within the bank. Maybe I'll stop there. I think I've done enough damage for 5 minutes.
No, I think it makes sense. I mean, you made, I think, and Koen as well, two very interesting points. One is that the startup actually should know what the problems of the financial institutions are, or who they want to sell into. And I know this from actually quite a few conversations with other companies as well, especially here in Asia or in Singapore. It has changed a little bit, but the past few years, like you're saying, a lot of the tech companies are just only going into, the buzzwords like, blockchain, or AI. I need to make a product because this is so cool. Yeah, this is cool, but then you try to sell that product to the bank or a financial institution, and it says, first of all, this is not the problem I have. Secondly, I don't actually really understand what kind of product it is that you're trying to sell me. And thirdly, we cannot just change our systems within 1 minute to implement your product, right? And then of course you are very frustrated because you worked hard on it, you got money for it, you spent all your time, but it doesn't really come across that it's really market fit. So that was the past few years pretty much the case here in Asia. I do know that has changed a little bit, but for instance, if I look at now ING, I think there is quite a bit happening in the labs over here. But the other point which you try to make is, banks have a certain process in place that had the traditional way of selling and buying. And if you do that the traditional way, then at least it is trusted and tested. So from that perspective, I agree with trusted and tested. But on the other hand, isn't the whole problem that the bank actually doesn't trust this new product or the new or smaller company or the company that hasn't really established itself yet that much that it can actually deliver all those things, or policy-wise or risk management-wise, what they're supposed to do in a more traditional way? Koen, I see both of you.
Yeah, I see Antonio as well. So maybe you go first this time. I will fill in afterwards.
Sure. I was just going to say, right, it's not so much about what you're selling. It's about how you're selling it, right? your coffee machine sells you the unique value of giving you a cup of coffee consistently every morning when you go to it. Now imagine that the interfacing with that coffee machine changes every single morning. Every single morning when you go down, the buttons are in different places. Sometimes they're labeled in Greek, sometimes Arabic, sometimes Hindi. You know, the colors have changed. The way some days you put in a capsule, the other days that you pour in beans. That's the nature of the buyer, right? If I'm that buyer of that cup of coffee, I'm the bank buying this new product that's there in front of me. And there's no understanding as to what the sales cycle looks like internally. It's very difficult for me to consume that thing. So it's not so much that, you know, it's the banks make it difficult or whatever. It's just that because of things like regulation, policies, processes, in these behemoth organizations, it's not that easy to get things through. So you just have to be able to figure out what it means to get to the heart and mind of who you're selling to, and then just execute.
I think that
say, right?
Yeah, but in a way, I agree what you say, Antonio, because taking the coffee machine as an example, at the end of the day, yeah, it's the employee that drinks a lot of coffee, but if you take the analogy of the coffee machine, it's probably the coffee for the client, and the client is thirsty. So it's up to the fintech or the RegTech to define and to understand the client is thirsty. And if you then understand how to get there, and you travel through the mazes of the bank, and I sometimes call that the 3 lines of defense. I used that word already once today, but it's also in selling. You actually brilliantly said that, Antonio, where you said you have to go through risk, to audit, to compliance, to the business. It's all of the levels that you have to go through, and you have to have a different story in all places. And maybe one more comment, I do like to bring in blockchain. Yes, because it spices up the conversation again a little bit. But I think that, yes, it's about technology, but it also changed us as a society. Because in my opinion, what blockchain brought, and then I'm taking this back to the early cyberpunks, it was around distributed trust. And this is an element to me which is still very important today. Mona, you mentioned as does the bank trust the fintech, and could somebody help? I do think that we're moving into a world where trust needs to be brought up a level higher. If you look at the regulator, I'm taking Europe as an example. Again, we were in that crisis that the regulator stood up and said, "Wow, we're gonna tame the beast. We take the tiger by the head, right? We take it close and we don't let it go." And they did that by saying, well, we changed a micro-prudential oversight into a macro-prudential oversight. So they increased, or they actually hired up the level. And even for some banks, they said, well, you're so crucial to the industry that you will be monitored out of Frankfurt, out of the ECB. They created the EBA, European Banking Association. But at the end of the day, and I take that example often, I met once a guy responsible for AML. He was working with AI, found a cluster, went to his first line, the boss, the CEO, and said, "Hey, I found some clustered information." So the CEO said, "Yeah, what do you do about it?" "Well, it's a cluster. I don't know. I cannot verify it." So they went to the regulator, and the regulator came back and said, "But here is your rule book. You should know." But then if you think about this situation, the data actually sits with the regulator. So if we find a model where we share this responsibility, I'm sure that more data in, rubbish in, rubbish out, we heard that already today, more data in would probably allow us to have a better view where the clustered information would be. And I think there are multiple examples like this. And yeah, central bank digital currency is definitely one of them. And there you see China taking a leap forward. Same as what we look at Singapore, for example. We also look at MIS as being a very front runner in terms of taking the responsibility versus what we see here in Europe.
Yeah. Suleiman, do you have anything to add to this?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm really enjoying the different views. And I see a lot of, everything that the gentlemen are saying makes a lot of sense, because it clearly comes out of experience, right? So you can see the passion in their statements. So, and I think, we've all been there, and we've all done that. We've all failed and tried to learn, to have some lessons learned so we can fine tune our performance. Going back to Antonio's point, And that's really interesting. And it's worth debating to whether we go back to the old way of selling, or do we actually adopt this whole new dynamics of buying and selling that came out of the fintech and RegTech wave. I don't think, my opinion, and here I may disagree a little bit with Antonio, just to add some fun to the conversation. Going back to the old way, it's all about value propositioning, right? And being really, truly, and genuinely value propositioning. And there is the aspect, okay, before maybe making that elaboration, there is the aspect of a buying cycle that's triggered by an outbound need, by a demand, or an inbound pitch, right? That's coming from companies wanting to sell into an ecosystem. So there is that variance, and maybe they need to be looked at differently. And the old ways of selling, which are still actually happening in other industries and in other spaces within the banking sector, like the conventional acquisition of technologies, of conventional technologies. Those are still following the business as usual, right? They haven't changed a lot. And I do see a fundamental problem in that dynamics itself. And a lot of pitfalls on both ends, on the acquirer end and the vendor end as well. And a lot of the failures that are happening, in those acquisition cycles is actually due to weak specification of requirements, weak specification of the demand. So it's essentially a demand, misdefinition, misconception, right? That translates into huge failures that can go really for years afterwards. What the new dynamics introduced, which is really interesting, is an acquisition cycle that is driven by a point, a challenge, and a point solution, right? That delivers immediate business outcomes. So that's what was happening, what has been happening, at least in my region, in the Middle East, and I think in a lot of other regions too. An acquisition cycle that's driven by a very well-defined challenge and a very well-defined solution to it. That didn't necessarily follow the conventional supply chain processes, and I see a lot of benefits in that process, which I already, and going back to where I may disagree with Antonio, is that this new dynamics has a lot of positive things that we can inherit back into the old ways of making an acquisition. So that's where I see a chance of learning from the new dynamics, and so we can fine tune the incumbent dynamics for better business outcomes. However, the new dynamics has gone to an extreme, just like any other dynamics. It starts like making a lot of sense, but then it gets into a variance that doesn't necessarily sustain the same benefits. So it went to an extreme of being rather than being challenge-driven acquisition, being a hackathon-driven acquisition. A challenge is not, and then again, I'm describing the dynamics of the Middle East, okay, which may not necessarily be similar elsewhere. Being a hackathon driven acquisition is not making sense to anyone, neither to the innovators nor to the incumbents. So that created a huge gap of and a huge repulsion from they took a step back. The incumbents are taking a step back because they're seeing that they're following a new dynamics that might affect their business models, without seeing what's going to be the end of it, and without seeing by seeing it more driven by the hype and less driven by the actual business models behind the disruption.
Yeah, well, and Pelle, because I hear a little bit one side and the other side. I really would like to include you in this discussion as well, because you said in the beginning, we are actually a very young company that that just exists for a few years. But you said also very clearly, collaboration for us works actually really well with the banks and with the regulators and with everybody, whereas you are in an area which, like 3 years ago, Bitcoin and that was really a no-go, especially for banks. I can even tell you that in Singapore, if you were a Bitcoin exchange or if you were a Bitcoin company, you couldn't even open a bank account back then, so that people needed to leave to other countries, right? So it was a bad word in a certain way. Of course, that has totally changed, and you helped with the regulatory side, with access as well, I know that. But it is a little bit contradictory what your story is and what, for instance, Antonio says and what Suleiman also brings to the table. So I really would like to, have your...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, in a previous life, I was out selling identity, enterprise, blockchain kind of things, and we were doing a lot of work directly, like hackathons, innovation groups, those kinds of things, and it was not necessarily a super satisfying experience to do this, because you would come with ideas that you think were actually, that you believed were actually really, really useful. And when you went through these experiences, oh yeah, we're working with some big company or whatever, or big institution, and then realizing this is like 5-6 years away before it actually becomes anything close to being real. So we've taken a very different approach here, and we actually, we were founded in April, our company, so we're very, very, very new, right? But
still in your honeymoons.
Yeah, we so we just raised our around everything, so and are learning the sales process. But actually, like what Antonio was kind of saying, what the ideal world is kind of like just good old-fashioned sales. That's pretty much the way that we're doing things right now, because like most of our customers are crypto exchanges that either have been regulated for a while, or there's a fair amount who are just like, oh no, we have to get regulated, right? And they're learning. So we have a mixture between those, and they have a very, very urgent need to sort these out. And the other side, also the areas that the companies or protocols that we're competing with are at such a low level that really, in reality, what we're doing is, because we have the only really complete solution in the market, we are actually competing against people building things themselves, and not just building from a tech, but building process, figuring out what this is. How do you apply the travel rule to blockchain? Now you have a counterparty layer on top of blockchain transactions. What do we do with that? Which is something a lot of people in the space haven't thought about before. So there's a lot of education, a lot of good old-fashioned sales. Sales cycles have been relatively easy for us because our customers, it's a do or die kind of situation. And then with banks, so we haven't actually been, we are talking with banks. There are some banks that are using us for as part of some sandboxes that they're working on. But all of them have been inbound. They've been coming to us. So we haven't actually been actively out pursuing banks, because right now we do need to show traction. We need to get to product market fit, and we have a whole class of customers who need that. Mm-hmm. And the banks who are coming to us are banks who actually already know what they're doing. They already have this idea how this fits into their overall strategy. So we don't have to go in and say, oh, banks, here's this thing called blockchain. No, they already know about it. They know what they're doing with it. They have their plan, and we're coming in to solve this final problem that they're having. So it's been fairly easy. Not that we have a lot of banks yet, but I mean, that our goal is really that's where we're going, because we see as the bridge from crypto into the banking world.
But when you talk about banks, you mean probably not the traditional banks, right? You're talking more about the digital banks. Or
no, also traditional banks. Yeah. So we are in talks with several traditional banks who are working. It's a surprising amount of companies. I mean, banks who've been working and building a lot of interesting things over the years. Like in this travel rule section, for example, we're not talking with ING as them being customers, but we are collaborating with ING as part of some of these standards groups and protocol groups that are working on solving it. So I know ING must be doing something rather really interesting, that they actually investing money in actively being involved. And of course, we'd be happy to talk with your team, Antonio.
That sounds like a very old school sales approach, Pelle.
Hey guys, we don't have that much time anymore. Actually, we have 3 minutes, and I see that we have a question. So I rather would like to go to that question first before we wrap it up. This question comes from John, and he says, can we clarify on Antonio's advice to small RegTechs on how we should be selling our coffee machine to big financial institutions?
Sure.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. And look, it kind of ties a little bit into what Pelle was saying, right? When you're engaging, when you look at what bigger banks are doing now in 2020, because of all the rush of fintech and RegTech, and let's say that the non-incumbent players tech players who are coming in and giving solutions, a lot of the banks, including ourselves, we've got teams for every kind of flavor of technology. So bring the solution, right? And part of that is what Suleiman was saying, right? You've got to identify what it is that you're solving. So practically, look, it's about stamina and action, right? So stamina consumes a tremendous amount of energy at a very almost a predictable pace. Know what that pace is. Be able to have the runway in your books to be able to weather what the sales cycles look like. For most banks, you're going to look to 18 to 24 months of, talking and convincing. And so then the second part really comes in is build a pipeline of banks you're going after, right? Because you need to go after 20 or 30 or 40 if you're hoping to get 3 contracts in the next 3 to 5 years. And these contracts, if you're selling the right thing, are going to be big ones, right? The second part, after you've got that pipeline, have a generic kind of stakeholder map that shows you, here's who I need to convince, here's who is the key decision maker, and definitely pinpoint that person that's going to sign on the check, right? Approve the invoice, get the work order going, and for that, to enhance your process, make sure that as you map out those stakeholders, the sequencing is going to be different in different institutions, but make sure you've got materials ready that you can send them immediately. Do not let 48 hours pass. I would say even 24 hours. Act fast. Learn from the American, car salesman, vacuum salesman, stockbroker, that model. You've got to be fast. Hello, Suleiman, how are you doing today? By the way, I owed you this. Let me send it to you, right? Maybe I'll part with this. What is the new way of selling, right? So we've been talking about the old traditional way of selling. What is the new way of selling? I haven't figured that out yet. I can't draw a box around it. And that's why I'm being dramatic here just to kind of push the point. But what's the new way of selling, right? If it's identifying a problem or even showing a potential customer that they have a problem that they don't even know they have, that still qualifies as the old traditional way of selling. So anyway, I'm just pushing the buttons just to do it.
Great. Hey, yeah, guys, our time is up, but I really would like you to give one more sentence for the audience to walk away with. What would you see as the perfect way to either buy into a large incumbent, or the other way around, being the perfect startup that actually immediately can sell their products ASAP. And Koen, start with you.
Ooh, I was had some other things in my mind, but never mind. I think it still comes back to the very basic stuff, is try to solve a problem which is real. If you can define that real problem, you're able to sell it.
Perfect. Suleiman?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more than with Koen. Really, this concludes it all, and I think we're in a historical era, right? And that must be acknowledged by everyone. What we're living today is not what we were living 10 years ago, and not what maybe we will be witnessing 10 years later. So it is a transitional era. And all that change and all that changing dynamics that's happening is really logical. And for that to lead to the intended outcomes to both ends, the supply and demand, they need to meet each other halfway. There's no other way, right? So we're doing what it takes from the financial institutions side, so we can change a little bit the mindsets and change the cultures, inject more risk appetite and so forth. And I'm seeing also the innovator side becoming less with their foot on the ground and wanting to collaborate and wanting to solve particular real solutions, as Koen has rightly mentioned.
Cool. Pelle?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand the actual like when it comes to selling compliant software, understand like what are the real reasons behind whatever it is the rules that people are trying to comply with. I think this is something that particularly in my particular very little tiny subset of the compliance space, there's a lot of people who actually don't understand the reasoning behind the rules that people are trying to comply with. And if you actually understand those rules and you understand how it actually applies to businesses, then it's a lot easier sale. And in a nascent space like we are, like in the blockchain space, a lot of people, they actually don't understand how to manage. They don't actually understand what these compliance rules are for. So a lot of it is educating. That's actually been a lot easier with banks, talking with banks, because they do understand what these rules are for, but a lot in the crypto space don't. So it's a lot of educating and then also applying it to how it's not just something to close business down. This is about, enabling business. It's about risk management, is about enabling business, not shutting things down. And once you have that mindset on it, it's relatively easy.
Yeah, and that's a really great closure, because that's what this whole day is all about as well. The most effective way to manage your risks with of course, in principle, new emerging market technologies. I really would like to thank you all, because we are already over time, and we have other sessions coming up. I had a blast. I've always great to see you. I mean, I know all of you, so that is cool. And now please stay for networking. You have to log off and log on again, but it would be nice if you can talk to other people as well. And again, thank you very much for your participation. We're super happy over you, Koen.